Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Great to see we have so many people popping in from all over the world to see the one, the only Mr. Marc Randolph. Mark, how are you today?
Well, thanks, Dan. Glad to be here, and welcome to everybody who's tuning in as we speak.
So, as you all know, Mark is the co founder of Netflix, the founding CEO of Netflix. And by the look of the color of his sweatshirt, um, just escaped from prison or is picking up garbage on the side of the road. What is it, Mark?
I have a pumpkin fetish.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Well, we've got lots of people here, and you guys are lucky because not only is Mark here, this is a primo snow day for him. So he is raring to hit the mountains, but he's sacrificing that for you.
Yeah, don't rub it in. I'm looking out my window behind the camera at the all the snow out there. But listen, I got my priorities are straight, and helping entrepreneurs is certainly priority number one.
Excellent, excellent. Well, and if as we watch and as you hear from this man, if you want to see more of him, there's a million ways to do it, but one that we're really excited about is Entrepreneur TV, which you can all see on Sling TV or on entrepreneur.com/TV. He episodes of Entrepreneur Elevator Pitch. Mark is the anchor of that show. You can learn so much watching and hearing from him. So we encourage you all to tune in, but we've got him live. So, Mark, what do you say? Should we get right to it?
Let's bring it on, Dan.
All right. Well, we got a lot of questions that were sent in before, but as always, if you have questions, pop them in the chat. We will get to as many as possible. This one came in from Jacob earlier today, and I think it's a good way to start because people talk about, you're starting your business, chase your passion. What's your passion? How do you combine your passion with entrepreneurship, and why is that so important? Jacob asks.
Uh, let's take the second part first. The reason it's great if you can combine your passion with your day job is that entrepreneurship is hard. I mean, despite what you see in the movies and what you see on TV, and despite what you see on Elevator Pitch, uh, there's a lot of grunt work that goes into this. There's a lot of disappointment. There's a lot of plugging away for days, weeks, and months without seeing a lot of progress. Um, and you have to be motivated by something deeper than that. And the most powerful motivation is this fascination with the subject. In other words, that you consider yourself lucky. You get to spend every day dealing with this thing that you are passionate about. Like in my case, I mean, Netflix was, startup number 6, I guess it was. And my passion was not necessarily the domain. It isn't like I was passionate about movies. I was a totally normal movie watcher. Just like my passion for the startup before that was not quality assurance software. No, my passion was entrepreneurship. My passion was I loved that process of solving really cool puzzles, of always asking myself, why is it done that way? There must be a better way. So I was lucky that way. But your passion might be different. Your passion might be, in fact, gosh, I've always loved stamps. And if you can figure out a company that has something to do with stamps, God, you get to do the thing you love every single day. And hopefully you have something you have a tremendous insight into. You understand. I don't know how I got going down the path of using stamps as an example, but let's go with it. Um, you know what it feels like to be a stamp collector. You know how unbelievably exciting it is when you discover some weird misprint of the price, which most of the world couldn't give a shit about. But you go, stamp collectors love this stuff. And you understand that. And you see the problems. You go, there's no transparency. There's no pricing consistency. And that's where it comes from, is all of a sudden you take this thing you loved and you recognize there's got to be a better way. There's this thing that I'm frustrated about. Maybe I'm the person to solve it. Um, you're lucky if it happens. I'm not sure how you can force it. But if it happens, you're a lucky person indeed.
That's great. That's great. And I know you say stamp nerds, but I know you're really into stamps. In fact, you have a tattoo of your favorite stamp. I won't say where, but um, so, a lot of times what we write about and what we talk about is this word success. And someone had written in, I thought it was a good question, which is, you've had, by all measures, success. But how do you define success, especially when you're starting something new? Like, what means success to you?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. And I think it screws a lot of people up. I alluded in that previous answer to the fact that, entrepreneurship has been glorified, that there are TV shows about it, that there's movies about it, that it gets a lot of popular press, that some of our heroes are like, Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos or an anti-hero and Elon Musk. There are entrepreneurs. And wow, that didn't happen 30 years ago. And what it makes people think is they're pursuing success when it's measured as economic success. They've made billions of dollars, or it's fame success. And the problem with measuring success that way is it's extremely unlikely that you're going to get it. And the parallel I've often used when talking about this is like people who want to be actors or actresses. And if the reason that they want to do that is because they want to be successful, which means being famous, which means being rich, which means being on the, this night show, not going to happen. It happens to a tiny, tiny fraction of people. And it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. So I've often said you need to define success differently. And again, you can't force it, but that for me, success was never that. For me, success was always defined as being able to do the things that you love doing and being good at them. And if you could spend your day doing something you love and that you're good at, I can't imagine a more successful business life than that. And for me, that's kind of been this motivator, is that I pat myself on the back every single day saying, I got to do the thing I love to do most of my life. And I was good at it. And it's interesting because I think I did have the kind of success that's the common definition. I did start, 2 very big companies. I did make a lot of money at it. I do have a really cushy lifestyle because of that. But it's never the reason I did it. And I think the reason I had that success is because I wasn't chasing it. It's because I was chasing the other success, that I was willing to keep coming. I liked coming to work every day, no matter how hard it was. I loved coming in and figuring out, oh my God, things are disastrous. How am I going to turn this around? And I think that's what leads to the other success. But listen, Dan, you know me. I can't miss this opportunity to say what the real definition of success is for me. And this is not the first time I've said it, but I have to lay it out, is that I mentioned Netflix was my 5th startup. And I've had a couple of really big economic successes. I've had a bunch of IPOs. I'm really, really, really fortunate. But what I'm proudest of and what the real success is that I've managed to make all that stuff happen and stay married to the same woman for 33 years now. I had 37. Oh, she'll kill me. Somewhere in the 30s.
That marriage just ended, Mark.
I have these 3 kids and I was just an hour ago going, God, it's so fun hanging out with them.
Yeah.
And the fact that I could start all those companies and still have those relationships with my wife, with my kids, that I can still go out and go skiing.
Yeah.
Man, that is success.
That's awesome. Oh, that's fantastic. A belated Valentine's gift to all of us. That's awesome. Well, who's watching, Abigail asked a question. It's kind of like the opposite of what you said, which is, you felt this like pride and patting yourself on the back sometimes, like, this is awesome, I get to jump in. But what about that old imposter syndrome that so many people tend to feel when they are doing that thing and they're all of a sudden like, wait, am I qualified to do this? How do you advise people to kind of overcome that?
I guess the only way to overcome it is to recognize you're not the only person who has it. that I think it's I genuinely think it's pretty universal. And I'll go out on a limb here. I think there's something wrong with you if you don't have it. If you think, man, I've got this nailed, I am so qualified, you're missing something. We've all got these flaws, and it's really healthy, I think, to question yourself. The thing you can't do is let that concern stop you. You can't go, I'm not qualified to do this, and so I won't. You got to go, oh boy, I have no idea what's going to happen. And almost always you go, oh, wasn't anything. It's the exact same. I do a lot of public speaking, and I at this point in my career, I get pretty big audiences. I'll have 4,000 people or 6,000 people, and I'm pretty good at it. But every single time backstage, I'm scared. I'm nervous. I go, I'm going to forget something. I'm going to screw this up. But the other part of my head is saying, remember, Mark, that as soon as you get out there, you won't be scared anymore. And that allows me to have the confidence. If I'm scared, I'm going to do it anyway because I know I won't be scared once I start. And imposter syndrome is the same way. You just got to force your way through it. If it's any consolation, I definitely have it. I was talking to my son just yesterday about how I have this element of imposter syndrome, about this project that I'm taking on. I'm going, is this going to work? And I go, I'm not going to stop me. And it makes me think this. A little healthy bit of paranoia is, I think, a critical ingredient for any entrepreneur. You should always be wondering what could go wrong and be thinking, how will I react when it does? And having a little bit of paranoia about your own abilities, I think it's healthy. So if you figure out how to get rid of it entirely, let me know. I could benefit from that too.
That's great. And, just building off of that too, you always hear about athletes and performers, that before they step on stage, they want to feel those nerves because that brings that energy to them. So like learning to use that as a superpower, I think is a great thing. We got a pretty cool question from Priya earlier. So apart from solving a real user problem, she asks, what are some of the other top factors you should consider before starting a company?
So I'm glad you brought up you got to solve a problem. You've got to solve a problem for a customer, because otherwise you fall into this terrible trap of you become an idea in search of a problem rather than a problem in search of a solution. And it's much, much better to be a problem in search of a solution. But you know that, and you're saying, what else is there? The next question is, do a lot of people have that problem? Because that'll help you decide what scale does this have the potential to be. I can have a problem which only 3 people have, and yeah, that might be fun, but it may not support the aspirations that you have for your business. So a lot of people have it. Do I, meaning you, is this a good match between my abilities and what it would take to solve this problem for this customer? So you might go, wow, it looks like there is room for a MRI machine, which costs about 25% of what the current ones do, using this new magnet, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. But great idea. Yeah, a lot of people want it? Absolutely. But big lucrative market? Absolutely. But do you know the first thing about what it would take to build a hardware product, which is going to take 2 or 3 years just to get to the beta version of? That's another criteria. Is this a good match for my abilities and the scale of where I am entrepreneur? And then, of course, the big one, going back to a question that just got asked a little bit ago, does this interest me? Is this something that I'm willing to allocate a bunch of my life to? So those are a lot of the things that would be going through my mind. And then the last one is, I guess, economically, are you willing to lock yourself into this? How long do you think this will take before you know if it's going to resonate or not? If you have a cool idea for something which is entirely digital, which can be done with a website, well, you'll find out really quickly. And so you can take some chances where you may evaluate it and say, I'm built, like one of the companies I was working with a while ago was building a robotic dishwasher. And we knew it was going to be several years before we could even get a product in front of a customer. And do we have the patience and the time and economic appetite for that.
That's great. And so we mentioned entrepreneur elevator pitch. You get pitched all the time, and you got a pitch that just came in from Okavang. Mark, can I get $10,000?
No. There you go. No. I mean, I guess the better answer is maybe, but highly unlikely. Or if for all the people out there who are wondering, what are the elements of a good pitch? That's not one. Make the ask, sure, but you need a few precursors to that first.
So what is a cocktail party or elevator, like a true elevator pitch, or if you do see someone that you think like, oh, this is my shot to get this idea in front of this person. I don't know if you welcome that kind of thing, but if you did, how would you say to cold approach somebody?
So the first and most important thing to recognize about that is that you're not trying to get the investment when you do that. And that goes, listen, cocktail party is a great analogy for this. You certainly are not trying to get someone to write you a check on the spot at the cocktail party. But that exact same principle applies to any way you're approaching someone. Your objective is not to get the investment with that first pitch. It's to get them intrigued enough to say, oh, let's talk some more about that. Or why don't you stop by the office? Or let's get on a call. Or that's what that elevator pitch is for. So if you do have I actually had someone only once in my life. I was at Looker, the last company that I did, and we were on the 4th floor. So this is not a long elevator ride. Luckily, it was a slow elevator. And he goes, hey, I want to run something by you. And we happened to be getting on the elevator and on those 4 floors. And it was purely designed to intrigue me or not. So that's what you do at a cocktail party, is see someone who could help you. Think to yourself, what can I say that will intrigue this person? Make them believe that this is an interesting idea, that has a reasonable size market. This is a new approach, and that this is the person who just might be able to solve that. And then if you're successful, they'll say, I can't talk about it now. I'm here with my wife. Get away. But listen, why don't you call me later?
That's great.
That would be what you get out of it. Saying, hey, can I get $10,000 from you? Here's my idea. I'm going to be turning over to the cocktail Franks in about 2 seconds.
That's great. Well, so you're talking about your marriage and your kids and that and your life outside of business. Really hit a nerve in the chat. A lot of people are asking how Mark, how do I strike a kind of balance like that to be able to chase what I want to do in business, but not have the rest of my life, fall by the wayside?
I'm thinking about the right way to answer that because there's so many different ways to approach it. I was not being glib when I said probably the thing that I'm proudest of was my ability to do that, which is to have a life and be successful as a business person, because it is really hard. And there's nothing I could say that would be able to convince you otherwise that it's not going to be really hard. It requires that you say this is a priority and that you mean it. And this is a story I've told a million times, so I'll give you the abbreviated version, but you can certainly find it in a bunch of places where I've been quoted online about it. But, way back when, before Netflix, I had realized that I was getting in too deep in the business thing. I was working every weekend. I was staying late. I was thinking about it all the time. I wasn't in the office, and not because I had some hard ass boss. I was just fascinated by it. I loved what I was doing, but I realized I was living with this woman at the time, who's now my wife, and she was getting absolutely the short end of the stick here. And I realized this was not the basis of a sustainable relationship, and committed to doing something different about it. And one of the things, among many, was saying that every Tuesday we're going to leave early. I'm going to leave work at 5. We're going to have a date night, no matter what's happening, no matter how big the crisis is, no matter who needs to meet with me, I'm leaving. And I stuck to that for years and years and years as a way of saying, I need to preserve this. But the amazing thing is, so much of what we get caught up in as entrepreneurs is this feeling that we have to do everything. We have to review every word that appears on the website. We have to sit there and go through the technical reviews and the code reviews. And we've really got to make sure that there's a million details, and no wonder you work 60 hours a week kind of thing. But the reality is that if you're really good at prioritizing, most of that stuff isn't going to make a difference. And you've got to be comfortable saying, I'm going to let a lot of stuff go. Things are going to go out that are not as good as the way I would have done them. And what you have to look back and say, are the things that I'm letting go, the ones that if they're not perfect, doesn't make a difference. And the ones that I'm paying attention to are the ones that do have to be 110% right. And what that does is frees you up to be able to have the other things that are important in your life. And besides just your family and your wife or your partner or your kids, you've got to keep yourself healthy. I mean, listen, I'm dressed up like a pumpkin right now because I'm about to go out and do some skiing. But I've done that my whole life. I have gone out to do backcountry skiing or mountain biking or canoeing or kayaking or surfing. And I've done that even while I was building these companies, even while I was keeping my marriage together. And I did that because I was extremely disciplined about prioritizing what was important and recognizing that I could let some stuff slide at work. And I've learned over time it was not going to sink the boat. So the answer, you've got to make it a priority. And if nothing else I can demonstrate is it's possible to have both.
That's great. And a question that came in, so that's your personal life, but what about the company culture? Like, how do you get that message out to people you're working with, who are working for you, and get them to strike that right balance too? Because you don't want them to take advantage of you either, I'm guessing. So how do you get that message out in a constructive way?
So these are such wonderful setup questions, Dan. I appreciate it. The as I've said many times, culture is observational, not aspirational. The culture doesn't come from what you want it to be. It does not come from what you publish as your culture manifesto or what you hang on the walls of the break room. Culture is how you act. And so you can talk until you're blue in the face. Oh, balance is important. This company, we really want everyone to have a life outside of work. And then if they see the boss who never leaves and who's sending text messages at 11 o'clock at night and on the weekend and getting people on conference calls on a holiday, that's basically saying one thing and doing another. And so kind of the miracle about those Tuesday night date nights was, besides keeping my relationships strong, everyone else was going, Mark is not, he's not feeding us a line here. He's actually doing this. He's walking the walk. And it was really amazing because not only did crises stop happening after 5 o'clock on Tuesdays, and people stopped needing to talk to me after 5 o'clock on Tuesdays, they all began realizing they could do these things, and it worked. But I got to throw in one last thing, Dan, which is that I and the rest of the team at the companies I've worked built a culture which supported that. And not every company has that. And we were extremely diligent about making sure that people who worked there had the judgment to know how to do that. To say, I'm going to judge you not by how many hours you work, not by where you're working from. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm going to judge you based on what you get accomplished. And if you can get the things accomplished that we need to get accomplished by working 2 hours a day, 4 days a week, all power to you. I'm jealous. But if you can do it working from the moon, whatever, I'm jealous. But I'm judging you in that. And people then recognize there are ways to get the things done I have to get done and have a life.
That's great. I love that. And it could not agree more. Mark often will email from a chairlift. He's always not. No, he does not. Um, in less happy times, so we got this question in from Chantel. How do you keep your sales and marketing teams motivated when things aren't going so swell? People feel not maybe it's not a sinking ship, but things aren't going great. How do you keep people at it and positive and energy?
Yeah, that's really challenging. And I don't want to give people the impression, oh, just hold the flag up. No, it's hard, and it's a bummer. And I think part of it, at least for me, is differentiating between whether they're things that we're doing wrong or whether they're things that are just happening in the market that we have very, very little control of. And I think a big piece of it is setting realistic goals and having the goals be far enough out that uh, you can remain motivated to be marching toward them, even though the current conditions for marching are pretty poor. I don't know how I can translate this, but I'll give you the personal version. Is I generally don't get bummed out about stuff because even when things are really bad, they're so interesting. I mean,
Right.
you learn more when things aren't going well than when they're going well. And that's genuinely true because when everything's going well, you're never quite sure what it is that's leading to the success. Is it things we're doing? Or is it the market's lifting all the boats? And even though we're going slower than everyone else, we're still, you can't tell. When things go to hell, you really begin to examine, wow, what's going on? And to me as an entrepreneur, that's fascinating. And the reason I bring that up is that that attitude becomes contagious, is that people begin recognizing this is really, really cool. We're learning so much. And this is the most genuine thing I can say. I don't know how to get you through it. That it's depressing. I guarantee it. That feeling of, oh my gosh, we're in an existential crisis now. If we don't get this right, we're out of business. But when I look back on my career as an entrepreneur at the times that felt most alive and the most exciting, and that my teams all talk about 10 years later, about what we remember about building a company together, we do not talk about the times it was going really well. The things we almost always talk about as being the coolest were when it was going really badly. So recognize it, appreciate it, and just think of the stories you're going to have.
That's so great. And if my kids are watching this, turn it off for a minute. But yeah, it's like you think back to college. You don't remember that test that you prepared for and studied and did great. You remember the thing that you forgot until 4 o'clock in the morning and banged it out and somehow passed. Like you remember the crisis and pushing through it. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I referred to the fact that I do a lot of outdoor stuff. I do a lot of less now, but I used to do a lot of mountaineering. And there's climbs that I remember, maybe they're 3 days, you 2 bivvies on them. And I can't remember most of it. The times I remember are when the epics took place, when the things were crazy, difficult and scary and dark. And that's what I remember. And I remember it extremely fondly. So what can I say? You'll look back fondly, I promise.
I love that movie about you free soloing El Cap. That was amazing. So we got a question in here from Larry who's saying, when you don't have a lot of funds, but you kind of do need help, do you have any ideas for how someone could maybe do like exchange services, or how do you kind of, I'll do this for you, you do that for me. How do you approach that kind of thing?
Well, there's a bunch of things. First of all, a tremendous amount of people are willing to help you out. If the problem that you're trying to solve is interesting, you can convince them it's interesting and you let them do something interesting. So, don't ask, don't get. I'll probably regret saying this on a large scale podcast, but I mentor companies. I have a handful of people that I spend a lot of time helping, and I don't get paid for that. I do that because it's really interesting. I like the founders, like the problem. So the most important thing is there are a lot of people who will do that. There are people who will exchange services. It would use something for them, that'll do something for you. The other thing to think about is you said, quote unquote, we're short on funds. Well, all companies, or most at least entrepreneurial companies, startups, have two sources of compensation. You have cash and you have equity. And the one you want to pay with is the one that's less dear to you. And listen, if at the beginning, when you have little or no money, well, you probably have 100% of the company. So give away some of it. Don't fall in this trap of I need to jealously guard every single share that I have, when being open about that and bringing in some smart people who will do some consulting for you or some contracting for you, or come on as a part-time employee or an employee that I can pay them largely or entirely in stock. It's another way to do it. And at some point in your entrepreneurial arc, when hopefully and likely you're very successful and all of a sudden fundraising isn't the problem, then it shifts. Then you go, I'm extremely, when we hire people, we don't give them very much equity, we give them more cash. And that's the balance you're always looking at. So yes, you can do it. Be clever, be creative.
We got a question in earlier today, and we'll try to get a couple more in before we release Marc to the mountains. Have you ever been part of a rebrand? How does that process go without kind of throwing away everything that you've done, but you need a pretty big change?
So you answered your own question. You need a pretty big change. So what's stopping you? And the way to make yourself feel better about this, and it works not just for rebranding, it works for changing prices, it works for changing feature set, it works for changing terms, is that you got to recognize it's way more important to get it right for your next 10,000 customers than it is to protect your previous 1,000 customers. And I'm always thinking that way. It's different depending upon the type of business you have. If you have a business, let's say you're an you're an airplane manufacturer. Well, there just aren't that many customers. So you can't afford to piss them off by changing pricing randomly and reneging on feature promises or whatever those things are. But if you're in a company where you go, we have 1,000 people now, and we think we're going to have 10,000 in the next 2 years and 100,000 after that, way more important to get it right for the future. So you just got to go ahead and do it. I mean, I am literally this morning talking about doing a very dramatic rebrand of something that I'm working on. And it's going to mean a pretty big disruption. But in my classic glasses half full personality, I'm going, this is awesome, because the people who stick with us, who migrate to this new brand, and are going to be the ones that I really want, rather than trying to hold on to the people who are kind of only partially engaged. So have courage. Onward.
Excellent. Well, Marc, you're getting a lot of love in the chat. People are loving all this, and I want to thank everyone for all these awesome questions and all the interaction. I see some of you talking back and forth to each other in the chat, which is awesome. Marc, I'm wondering if, as we prepare to wrap this up, maybe if you could send people out with a little homework. We do these every couple of months, but maybe something people could kind of set their sights on in like a 2-month window. What's something that everyone could put their mind to?
Well, that's a good question, Dan. I would say, because I know that the scale of the businesses from everybody is very, very different. You're all on different stages, different markets, so kind of hard to be generic. But I would say, almost all, using this last branding question as an example, there's probably always something that you've wanted to try that everyone's going to freak out about, whether that's the rest of my team, whether that's my customers. And I'm not doing it because I'm scared of the reaction. And I think some great homework is to say, how can I figure out a way to try this and see what happens and see whether all my fear is warranted? Because what I suspect will happen is exactly the same thing that happens when you have stage fright, that happens when you have imposter syndrome. And that is that the imagined crises are always way, way more extreme than the real ones. So there you go. Take something that you've been a little bit scared to try because you're scared of the pushback or the damage or the whatever, and figure out some way to do it.
That is awesome. I love it. Mark, please tell us, besides checking out Entrepreneur Elevator Pitch on Sling TV and entrepreneur.com/TV, how can people keep up with you and hear even more of these great words from a great man?
So one of the things I noticed, certainly, Dan, because I can see this, the scrolling of the comments on the right side of my screen here, is that we've had probably a ratio of 50-1 of questions asked and questions answered. And I feel badly I'm not able to answer all of them. But I will point you to a few resources that might go a little further toward helping you out. One is obviously Entrepreneur. Besides Entrepreneur TV, they have a huge range of resources, all designed to help entrepreneurs. So make sure you check out what they have to offer. Number two, if you come to marcrandolph.com, you can find a way to find all the other ways that I spout nonsense, either whether it's on Twitter or on LinkedIn or on Instagram and on TikTok. And you can also read all my blog posts there or sign up to get them in your mailbox every Wednesday. And finally, I'm actually engaged in a big entrepreneurial community called Neverland. It consists of about 2,500 entrepreneurs just like all of you. And I'm there almost every day answering questions. But more importantly, there's people from all over the world with all ranges of experience in all kinds of different domains who can help. And if you want to apply, it's a membership, it's an invitation only, but if you want to apply for membership, you can see the link right there on your screen, and hope to see some of you there. And Dan, thanks for the opportunity to at least answer a few questions, as many as we could.
Oh man, we love it. We are so appreciative. And everyone, follow Mark on Instagram because he's heading out to the mountains. He'll be posting photos of him fighting a Yeti or doing whatever he does out there. So
you can imagine that, Dan. I think that's a good image for me.
okay, great. Well, thanks again, Mark. Thanks to everyone who showed up and for the great questions. And we will see you again next time.
See you all next time. And thanks again, Dan. Great job.
Thank you.